Jim and Josh with You Don't Know Squatch.
Hey there, hi there, ho there.
Everything about Bigfoot. That's the whole goal of this podcast. We got a treat for you this time. We've got a good friend, Dennis Pfohl, who has a wealth of experience in Bigfoot research, and particularly one interesting aspect has to do with Bigfoot DNA. What do you think about that, Mr. Skeptic?
I don't know. That sounds. How do we know it's not part of the family already in the database?
Well, you're going to find out, and we're going to give Dennis a call here and see what he has to say.
All right, so you know what that means. It's time to talk Squatch.
It's talking Squatch. Let's get on with it.
Your call will be answered in the order it was received.
All right, today we're joined on the phone by Dennis
Pfohl.
Dennis Pfohl. You want to tell us a little more?
Sure. Dennis is a friend I've had for a long time. We've shared an interest in Sasquatch research and just friends otherwise. But Dennis has agreed to come on and share a little bit about his experience in this whole realm of Sasquatch research.
All right, thanks for joining us, Dennis. How are you doing today?
Good. Good afternoon, Jim and Josh. Thanks for having me on.
You're
glad
welcome.
to have you.
Yeah, glad to have you. So, Dennis, just for the sake of those who are listening who don't know you, tell us a little bit about whatever got you interested, a little backstory on your interest in Sasquatch.
Okay. Well, I guess like many people who kind of get blindsided by this subject, I guess you would say it's, I grew up in the era of Patterson-Gimlin. I mean, I'd seen the footage on TV and thought it was all, fascinating and interesting, but like many, I never gave it too much thought, spent a lot of time outdoors, but I thought if Bigfoot existed, if they were real, that would be something kind of limited to the West Coast and California and Washington, Oregon, those areas. Never thought about Colorado, and so I moved here to Colorado, from California actually, in the late 80s, and met my wife and married and had kids and kind of raised my family out here and called Colorado my home. But spent a lot of time in the woods in Colorado with my kids as they were growing up, like I did when I was young. I spent a lot of time camping and fishing with my own dad and family. So many years, in the woods, we can't say anything unusual ever occurred or happened. Again, I didn't give much thought to Bigfoot, but it was, I think in the late 90s, things suddenly started changing for us on that aspect in terms of we were camping in remote areas usually when we go camping, away from campgrounds and other people, and that's just the way we like to do it. And it was during one of these camping trips that we were out jeeping with my family, and while we were out jeeping, we were camped in a remote spot in central Colorado in the high Rockies. Jim, you've probably been to that location several times now with me. And anyways, it's one of those places that, of course, beautiful high country, near the tree line, and the camp areas are both tree line, but it's in the high country. Anyways, we were getting ready for a long weekend of jeeping and spending time with family, and we came in fairly late on a Thursday evening and set up camp. It was well after dark. And when I was setting up camp, we were the only ones in there. So by the time I got done putting the pop-up camper up, my God, it just the kids had gone to the other side of the pop-up on their side to go to sleep, and I had went to read a book to relax after all that hard work. It was about 10 p.m. So it was pitch black outside, no moon. And as soon as I started getting sleepy, I reached up to turn off the lantern that was on inside the camper. And when I turned off the lantern to put my head back down on the pillow, something came into the camp, and it was disturbing to me because whatever it was seemed to be that it was waiting outside, just outside and very close to the camper. till it got dark. But it was very methodical, and the way it just came in instantly as soon as the light came off. And so I've dealt with bear.
To happen, maybe.
Oh, and no doubt in my mind. No doubt in my mind. In fact, that's what went through my mind as it was occurring, as it came in, was whatever it was had been sitting there for who knows how long, and it just waited for it to go dark. But anyways, what happened is whatever it was came in, and it started scratching down the side of the canvas of a pop-up from above my head, which was over 6 foot level, to the other side of the camper, as it seemed like it was walking or passing by and scraping it with something, I don't know, but it was a tearing sound that went all the way down the side of the camper. And it woke my wife up. She's a light sleeper, but it woke her up from a dead sleep. And she whispered in my ear, she said, "What the hell was that?" And the only reaction I could come up with is, I don't know. But I'm used to bears and other animals, coming in around camps. We've had that happen, I don't know, a multitude of times. And this was completely unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Yeah, whatever it was, seemed like it went straight to the other side of the camper, and the kids had the bicycles up underneath that end of the camper, and it started twirling the pedal of one of the bicycles. You could hear it audibly spinning. You could hear it, like when you hit a pedal hard and it spins, like something playing with the pedal. And again, in my mind, I'm saying, bears don't do this kind of stuff. What is going on here? And anyways, we're listening, and this thing, whatever it was, came around to the front of the camper in no time at all. And we had a little awning pulled out in front of the door to cover the front door. And underneath that awning, there was a couple of totes that little plastic totes that you get at Walmart. You put stuff in, it's got the lid, and you snap them on. And inside one of those totes, we had firewood and a hatchet and some stuff for fire-making materials. And that was sitting outside the door. Well, whatever this was, came right up to that tote and opened the lid. Now, when it opened the lid, that's when I really got disturbed, because in my mind, I'm trying to reason. You're in pitch black. You can't even see the hand in front of your face, kind of black. It was a moonless night. We're in the forest. The canopy overhead. It's dark. And this thing's moving around effortlessly, Jim. I mean, it was as if, you can see through some of the canvas on these campers, somewhat. And if there was a flashlight outside, I know I would have seen at least hints of a flashlight. But there was no illumination coming from outside. And whatever it was moving around outside effortlessly in this pitch black. And it could apparently see very well, and it was acting like a human. So in my mind, they cross my mind. I'm telling myself, well, it's got to be a bear, but why would it open the tote? And how could it open the tote like a human being, easy, with like it has hands, and the behavior and actions of this thing just is what bothered me. It was just not like a wild animal, like a bear. It was very methodical. So in my mind, I'm thinking, this has got to be a human being. This is a man outside. He's trying to, break into my camp. He's messing with my camp, but he's got no flashlight. None of this makes sense. None of it adds up. So I'm very disturbed at that point, Jim. I'm just very uneasy. Never had anything like this happen. So underneath my pillow, I had a 357, and I kept that for wild animals, for where we camp. And I remember pulling that thing out and having it ready, thinking if whatever that is messes with the door, if it starts to come through the door, well, it's getting the full garage of my 357. And I'll ask questions later because my family's in there, and whatever this behavior is just not right, I felt like my family's in danger at that point. It was a feeling that, believe me, I've had only very few times in my life, and it was one of the worst feelings in the world, thinking, I may have to kill a man tonight, right in front of my family and my kids.
It was a feeling of vulnerability, I'm sure.
Absolutely. I mean, and I've camped in wilderness areas, so many years, and I've never had that kind of occurrence or feeling before like that. So anyways, you could hear it had opened the tote. It had started rummaging around in the tote, like shifting stuff around. and then it put the lid back on the toad. So again, I'm going back to, this has got to be a bear, but it's not a bear. Whatever this is just too methodical. It's like a human. So I go back in my mind, I'm saying it's got to be a person, and I didn't want to tell my wife that. I remained quiet and remained looking at the door and waiting for something to start messing with the door, and I thought, well, this is it. Here we go. But that never happened. So our dog was curled up on the floor right inside the camper, and our dog had been camping us there with us a lot of times, so she was kind of used to the area and used to camping with us. And right about then, she started stirring when she heard this thing outside the door messing with the toad. And I could hear her start sniffing around the edges of the door, and then she starts growling. So I got, I started getting concerned that her growling would make whatever this was outside angry. And then, that might actually incur an encounter, or whatever this was. If it was a bear or wild animal, that might, challenge it, try to come in. So I was trying to get the dog to be quiet, trying to whisper to her, hey, be quiet, shut, Lucky, shh. And she just kept growling and growling. And this, whatever was outside got real quiet, and it sounded like it moved off. So about a minute later, it started growling back. Got real quiet when the dog started growling. But whatever it was moved out, moved away, it seemed like, and it started growling back at her from a distance from the camper now. So they're growling back and forth. The dog would growl, it would growl. The dog would growl, but I'll say the growl, that whatever it was outside wasn't super loud, but it was very weird. It was a high-pitched, grumbly, just like a, hey. It literally, it almost sounded just like that. It is just, yeah, and so it's all very disturbing to me, let me tell you. Very, very much just, it was just an experience that, raised the hair in my arms even when I talk about it today. So this went on for a couple minutes, this growling back and forth, and finally whatever was outside just quit growling back at the dog, and they just both kind of calmed down and got quiet. And I sat there for the longest time at the edge of the bed, ready, at the door. That was only like 2 feet from the door. And total silence. And I don't know, half an hour, 45 minutes went by. Totally quiet outside. I laid down. Yeah, I want to say I'd grab a flashlight and look around, but I thought, well, I can't hear anything. And this thing was very loud when it came in, so I'm imagining that if it's still there, well, it can't still be there. It must have moved off. So I laid back down and had my 357 still in my hands. And next thing I know, I wake up. It's morning. Sun's out, and the whole thing's behind me. And I think, oh, okay. I get up and put my shoes on and go outside and start looking around for bear sign. And of course, I find nothing. So that day we went out jeeping, and the people that we were going to be camping with never showed up. So we get back from jeeping about 3 or 4 p.m., and they're not there, and we're thinking, they said they may not come if they're not there by midday on Friday. And here it was well past midday. So I looked at my wife, and she looked at me, and we both knew exactly what we were thinking. We said, nope, we're not spending another night here. Not after that. So we packed up everything, and we hightailed it out of there, and that's something we've never done. We've camped there in a number of times and had weird stuff happening. But, I can't go into all of that. There was strange stuff, I guess, when you look. In retrospect, you look back on that and say, well, these weird things could have been very well related to that. The dog had always been nervous camping there where she wasn't nervous in other places. Anyways, long story short is I thought, well, that could have been a bear, but in my mind, I just couldn't come to grips with that. It just told me there was something more to it. It was like a man. It was like a human. And I thought, well, could it have been a Bigfoot? And I thought, that's ridiculous. That's silly. The very next summer, we were up jeeping near there, not in the same area, but we were a few miles from that, up in high country jeeping. And we stopped at a lake up there, high altitude lake that was above tree line to fish it. One of the rare occurrences we have a deep enough lake to fish that holds fish, without winter kill. And so I wanted to fish it. And I jeeped up there with the wife and my daughter, and we stopped there to eat lunch. And as I was walking around the lake to look for a place to throw my line in, my wife and daughter literally tripped in on a large footprint found right next to the lake, fresh. I mean, the grass was still popping on the edge of it. and it was 15 and a half inches long, sunken in the tundra there at the edge of the lake, significantly, like 2.5 inches at the toes, pushing off like it was pushing off to the hill. And it was a complete foot, like a human-sized foot, but a huge big toe, and then you can see the other 4 digits. So a total of 5 digits, just like a human's foot, but immensely large. And you could see that if you know anything about tracking, which I did have training in tracking, this track was so fresh that grass was still popping at the edge. And I'm standing on this tundra, and I'm not even making a dent on it, Jim. And at the time I weighed maybe 170. And whatever this was told me it was very heavy, it was very large, and it had just been in the lake. I mean, the water, which was 20 feet from where the footprint we found, was disturbed still. You could see the mud in it. So I guess when we had jeeped up to the edge of this lake, no one was in that valley, that little bowl. And whatever this was seemed like we might have spooked it off, but it was a very human-like footprint. It was at that moment when I was looking at that print in the ground, I remember, Jim, that whole occurrence the previous year at that campground, which wasn't too far away, the camping area. It all came back to me and it said, if Bigfoot are real, that makes total sense. And that's actually was a relief to me at the time, thinking, well, maybe it wasn't a crazy mountain man that was, invading our camp.
Funny that the Bigfoot idea would be a relief to you.
And that's just it. I thought to myself, oh my God, these things are real. That explains a whole lot of these weird things that have happened. So then I got on the internet. I did a lot of research. This was back in the early 2000s, 2001, 2000, somewhere in there. I'd have to look at my archives to see for sure. It's been a while, but the more I did research, Jim, and like anyone else who spends a little time, and you start really getting into the subject and digging into it. Now there's so much available. There's so much information on the subject available online. But back then, there was fairly limited resources, but there was still a lot of information you can pull up and some science, burgeoning science on the subject that was available. And I was really surprised to see how many reports came from our very own state of Colorado that are out there. And even back then. And now there's been so many more documented with the BFRO and other great research groups like yours, Jim, like the Sasquatch Outpost, and our own group, which we founded in 2003. It's Colorado Bigfoot Research Group. But it's like anything. The more I learned about it, Jim, the more I wanted to know. And I got sucked into this whole world of Bigfoot mystery and the phenomena. And the more you know, the more fascinating it becomes, and the more you realize that this is really a bigger world than we ever believed it could be, and a greater, more fascinating place than most people realize, I think. So.
Well, that's. I mean, you told me this story. It was great to hear it again. And I had a very specific question. I know that a number of years ago, there was actually a DNA study done on what was thought to be Bigfoot hair, some tissue, saliva, and some blood. And I believe you were one of the contributors to that study. And I'm sure most people don't even know about it. If you just briefly tell us kind of what you contributed and what the results of that study were.
Okay, yeah. Well, in 2005, I was a member of the Bigfoot Bill Research Organization here in Colorado, which is, everyone's probably heard of them. They, if you heard of Finding Bigfoot, you're aware of Matt Moneymaker and Bobo and Cliff and Renee. And they were, Matt was the founder of the BFRO, which is a nationwide organization of Bigfoot researchers who contribute their own time freely for this research. And every state in the union has investigators, and every state in the union in the contiguous U.S. has had Bigfoot reports, believe it or not. Every single state. There's only been two I'm aware of that we really don't have any data from. Could you guess what those are, Jim?
In the contiguous U.S.?
Well, I would say not contiguous. I'd say in North America.
Surely we've had reports from Alaska.
Yes.
Okay.
But believe it or not, the only two that we don't really have any much documented that I'm aware of was Hawaii although maybe recently something might have come
I've heard
up.
some recent
But
things.
Hawaii,
Yeah.
yeah, and then Puerto Rico, I believe, was the other one.
Okay.
So, anyways, long story short is that every state has had reports and sightings from various individuals over the years, and people would think not in the deserts, but yeah,
even
have
in
them
the
there, and even the flat plains out in Oklahoma and Kansas and eastern Colorado. But being part of the group, I've associated with several hundred other investigators from all over the U.S. and Canada. And one of these investigators' name was Adrian Erickson, who at the time was a BC investigator out of British Columbia. And Adrian and Matt had struck an agreement to work together on a case out of Kentucky where a woman had claimed that she had regular visitations from a Sasquatch. And actually it was reported by the neighbors first. So the woman actually didn't report it. It was the neighbors who had seen it themselves and reported to the BFRO as well as the sheriff. And then many people dismissed it right off the bat. And Adrian, though, had went kind of behind the scenes and talked to Matt and said, hey, let me help finance anything needed to follow up on this, because it sounds like a potentially good case. Something similar to Janice Carter, which, if people are aware of that, it's kind of a dated, it's a dated story. It goes back a ways, but out of Tennessee, there was a woman who had claimed that she had a family that had spent time around a family of Bigfoot, a rural farming family that had basically, had many experiences with a small family of Bigfoot that was living near their farm. So Adrian felt like this could be potentially another good scenario where if this creature was imprinted on this woman or had felt some sort of tie to this woman, a bond, which is obviously it would be a very rare thing, that there could be good potential and maybe learning something about these things through this woman, if we have access. So Adrian and Matt worked out an agreement to try to work to get more evidence from these people. But this was a project that went on for about 5 years. And Adrian at the time, I had been an acquaintance of mine. I had talked to him several times on the phone regarding some reports that I had been working on here in Colorado, situations where a rural family home had repeat visitations by what we believe were Sasquatch as well. And so I've been working that case for a little bit, and Adrian had gotten word of that. So he called me, and we discussed it on the phone a number of times in several months. And then one day he called me up and said, hey, would you want to come out and help me in Kentucky with this project? So, of course, I was excited about that. I'd heard a lot of things about it. So I thought, well, hey, let's go see what's going on there and see if, there really is something happening. And if there is, if we can do anything to, work with this family. So I did, and I got involved with this project. And 5 years, we brought in a scientist, a PhD.
And you actually lived there, didn't you? Did you not, for 5 years?
No, but our scientist did. We
Okay.
had her on site and on location, and her name was Leela Hotchek. And we had other guests at the location, Dr. Jeff Meldrum, Dr. John Bindernagel, Dr. Bird Nelson, Adrian, and several other higher profile people involved with Bigfoot research at the time. And so these people we brought out to help witness or corroborate some of the stuff that we were experiencing there in this 5 years. But in that time period, we spent that time trying to gather and gather evidence, trying to gather video evidence, spore, just hard evidence like footprints cast, hair samples, audio recordings, video recordings, things like that. Thinking that these will be the tools, and this would be the way that we could help the whole Bigfoot community maybe bring forward some progress on this finally. But we found that along the way, of course, there's a lot of difficulties in there that you don't really think of when you go into things like this. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of complexity and a lot of issues, in so much that not only the creature's hard to get to, but dealing with other human beings are also a factor a lot of us don't put in place. So there was a lot of difficulties and a lot of issues that we had trying to move forward with that project. But in the end, 5 years, we came to a conclusion near the end that we weren't making the progress we were hoping we could make in terms of videography, and we did get some decent video clips, not great, but some decent ones. We got thermal imaging. I think we got some of the first thermal images ever taken with cameras, but I know the public hasn't seen those. We used surveillance footage. We used game cams everywhere, although the game cams you'd think would be really great in a situation like that, but they actually turned out to be very, very limited success with the game cameras. Got a lot of deer and game with the game cameras, but only just a very few limited photos and things of what we believe were the creatures we were dealing with there. So in the end, we kind of knew the way things were going with the husband and wife we were trying to work with was not going well with them. So we thought, well, we see an end to this project coming, and we see a sunset to this coming. That eventually it wasn't going to last forever. We were hoping it would, but it wasn't going to last forever. So we determined that, and we were counseled by several other big names that, hey, look, see, the way that you really can't refute the existence of this undocumented species would be through DNA. You cannot alter DNA on a molecular level. So people can't say you hoax DNA. I always like to say, Josh and Jim, that if somebody wanted to think that they're going to, pull a hoax on DNA, trying to fool people into believing that they've got a hybrid human chimpanzee or monkey mix, you can't take blood of a chimpanzee, which is the closest related primate to humans, and a human being, mix it together and say, hey, here you go, a new species. Because all that they would find in that blood is human DNA and chimp DNA separate from each other,
Completely
but not a
separate,
hybrid, not
right.
a mix.
So mixing it up in a cocktail shaker just won't do it.
Won't do it.
All right.
You don't get a mixed DNA
that's
from
correct.
mixing it up in a cocktail.
No, exactly. You cannot do that. So that is one piece of evidence that if you could bring something forward that you are sure came from one of these creatures that can be documented, that might be, no matter what else you have presented, whether it be footprint cast and video and audio and hair samples, that you can't really argue that. And we were told in the end that would be the ultimate thing. So our goals were to try to get DNA, and we were setting plates of food out. So getting saliva samples, we had probably tens of dozens of those plates that we had collected over the years and properly stored with our scientist, our biologist, Layla. And we had submitted a number of those to various labs all over the U.S., and it kept coming back as contaminated, human, and sometimes we get other animals in there like cats or dogs, and we'd know that. But every once in a while, we get these coming back that say, well, they look to be contaminated human. Well, we knew that we had properly handled these plates and stored these, and we knew that in talking with other researchers who had also submitted DNA samples that they were positive were handled correctly and that they felt confident that they had gotten DNA from a Sasquatch, that they still came back as showing contaminated by human or human. So we knew after so many samples that there's more to this than just people contaminating these samples everywhere. And so we also knew that they do the base markups on those to identify a species. I think it's a 640 pair of chromosomes. Now, I'm not totally versed on this. It's been a number of years now since I spoke with the experts in this and our scientists, so my memory's a little foggy there. But there's a base markup which they can tell all the species through a basic code in the DNA. And what we needed to do, and what we talking to ourselves about this, we said, well, we know that these things, in all the eyewitness reports and sketches, they look very human. They act very human. And we knew in our own experiences at the project in Kentucky that these things, I felt so many times, Jim and Josh, that I was dealing with a very highly intelligent, human-like behavior in these things. The way they acted, the way they reacted, the things they did, they were always a step ahead of us. And Jim, you know that.
Yeah.
You know?
Wow, that was a wealth of information, so much so that I think we're going to have to break this up into 2 parts.
I think we will, part A and part B.
So, for sure, we'll have part B next week, the following episode. As always, we'd really appreciate if you go over to iTunes, Google, whatever you heard us on, give us a 5-star rating. It really helps out. And you got anything else for us?
Oh, just to let people know, if they ever have a question they want us to try to answer, feel free to put that in there as well.
That's right. We'll have actually a link on our website and on the description of the podcast where you can send those questions in. And I guess until next time, stay squatching, and always remember,
you don't know Squatch.